We would like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by OraSure Technologies 30-Minute Mondays webinar series. Today's presentation is entitled Safety Sensitive Oral Fluid Drug Testing, and we'd like to turn the time over to Bill Current.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about oral fluid drug testing and how it pertains to safety sensitive workplaces. And just to kind of bring this into sort of an area of focus, I'm not going to be the presenter. I'm going to be asking questions of the presenter. Today's presenter will be Judy Swartley. Judy is the president and founder of Red Planet Substance Abuse Testing. She's been in the drug testing business for about 20 years, and she founded Red Planet Substance Abuse Testing in 2008, so about 12, 13 years ago. I've known Judy for a long time. She really knows her stuff, and so I think we're in for a nice treat today. Let me just say, prior to kicking this off, that the next 30-Minute Mondays webinar series presentation will be June 1st. So no 30-Minute Monday webinar series next week. That's Memorial Day. But we'll come back on June 1st with a presentation on point of care testing and lab-based oral fluid testing. And then 3 Mondays in June after that, we'll have COVID-19 specific webinar presentations. Again, there'll be 30-Minute Monday presentations. So let's set the table here for our discussion. These statistics come from the federal government. Even though you see a different source down there at the bottom, they all come from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They do an annual survey on drug abuse and drug abuse trends throughout the country. It's really one of the best sources of information, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, and it breaks down substance abuse trends by ages, by employment categories, by geographic areas and regions in the country, etc. It's the best that's out there. And as you can see here, according to SAMHSA's most recent report, these were the industries that had the highest rates of substance abuse by occupation. So people in the food services industries, for example, they would answer questions, identify what occupation they were in, and then they would gather that information and come to the conclusion here that 19.1% of people in the accommodations and food service industry are past month illicit drug users. And the way SAMHSA does that is they have 3 designations. One is lifetime use, meaning you've used drugs at least once in your lifetime. Past year use, meaning you've used drugs at least once in the last year. And then past month use, and they refer to those people as regular drug users. Those are people who admit to using an illicit drug at least once in the last 30 days before the survey. So you can see 19.1% for food services, 13.7% arts, entertainment, and recreation, 12% managements, 11%, almost 12% information, and 11.6% for construction. Now let's look at alcohol abuse trends. These are the industries that had the highest reported rates of alcohol abuse. These are individuals who use alcohol on a regular basis. Mining, 17.5%, construction, 16.5%. You see the overlap, right? Food service industry at almost 12%, arts, entertainment, and recreation, 11.5%, utility at 10.3%. Now, these are industry positive drug test results. So this is from one major laboratory that reported, and let me just read it, it'll be easier to do it that way rather than try to paraphrase it. Retail trade is one of 6 sectors or industries that saw year-over-year double-digit increases in positivity, that's drug test positives, between 2015 and 2018. 5 of these experienced an overall 4-year increase in general U.S. workforce positivity, more than double that of the national increase. So the national increase was 6.2%. In other words, drug test positives are going up nationally across the board at 6.2%. But these industries had increases of at least double what the national increase is. So Transportation and warehousing, 34.5%. That doesn't mean that 34.5% of all people in the transportation and warehousing industry are admitted drug users or had positive drug test results. That's the increase from prior to 2015. So a 34.5% increase between 2015 and 2018 in transportation and warehousing. Wholesale trade, 20% increase. Retail trade, almost 15%. Construction, 13%. Administrative support, waste management and remediation, 12.2%. Pretty significant. Now, you've seen these statistics for drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and then the increase in positivities. Now overlap that with the industries with the largest number of workplace injuries, according to a study done by the National Safety Council, and you see a trend. You see the same industries reporting having the highest reported levels of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, positive drug test results, and then, no surprise, also injuries on the job. And so we're going to talk about safety sensitive workplaces today and the different types of drug testing, but primarily we're going to focus on lab-based oral fluid testing, a little bit on POCT oral fluid testing as well. But as we go through this, and as Judy's asking questions, or answering questions, think about the questions that you have and put them into the question section or the chat section that's on the screen in front of you, and we'll get to as many questions as we can today. And if there are any that we can't get to, then we will write out answers and email them to you as well, okay? So you ready to get started, Judy?
Yep, sure am.
All right. Well, let's start with a real basic question. Because you've been doing this a long time, you work with a lot of employers in safety sensitive industries and occupations. What is a safety sensitive position?
Well, basically the majority of our customers being in safety sensitive positions, I reached out to a lot of them and I took a look at what research had to say, and research says a safety sensitive position refers to a job in which the employee is responsible for his or her own or other people's safety. It also refers to jobs that would be particularly dangerous if performed under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So after reaching out to a couple customers in particularly in construction and then in the nursing home industry, construction basically said the same thing. A job or position where the employee holding this position has the responsible for their own safety or other safety. It would be most important if such an employee is under influence or using drugs or alcohol while on the job, because they want the people to have a clear mind and be diligent while they're doing their job. Another construction company decided to make it a little bit more specific by stating if 2 or more people have a common need, they're working together on a job, they would hurt themselves if they were working around electricity or chemicals. That's how they define safety sensitive jobs. And then lastly, one of our nursing homes stated that all positions and departments are required to protect the health, welfare, and well-being of residents and staff.
Okay, so safety sensitive positions can be lots of different types of occupations where an employee who might be under the influence of drugs could cause harm to other people. I guess that's a sort of a really condensed way of putting it, right? So what's been your experience working with safety sensitive companies in drug testing? Is it common for safety sensitive companies to have drug testing programs, and what type of drug testing do they typically do?
Yeah, almost all of the safety sensitive companies do have drug testing. And I must admit that was not necessarily true 20 years ago, which is hard to believe. But if I was giving a presentation, only half of the people would have drug testing at their companies. But now, we've come the full circle, and most of them, if not all of them, have drug testing. We like to educate people on the benefits of lab-based saliva drug testing. As a result, most of our business, I'd say about 90% of our business, is with lab-based saliva drug testing. According to statistics, the lab-based saliva drug testing detects the most positives in general, Therefore, if a majority of workers at a company are in safety-sensitive jobs, it stands to reason that the company would be interested in the drug test that's most accurate and detects the most positives, which is lab-based saliva. Also, since lab-based saliva drug testing is virtually impossible to cheat, the company doesn't have to worry about that element of drug testing, and eliminating dilute urine specimens and shy bladder issues is an added advantage.
Okay, so let's talk about construction for a minute. Years ago, I wrote an article on substance abuse in the construction industry, and there's a certain demographic typically within the hiring in the construction industry. Not always, of course, and I don't mean to create some kind of a stereotype, but you're talking about younger people, males primarily, not always, of course, transient workers, etc. So tell us a little bit more about your experience working with construction companies in particular.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's take into consideration a company we just brought on board. It's a construction company with operations in 5 states. The safety manager was using urine drug testing, but he was tired of wasting time trying to make appointments at collection centers, especially for the random drug tests. And because of COVID-19, it's been really difficult finding collection centers that are open, much less open after 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a post-accident drug test. He was also concerned about the cleanliness of the collection centers and the safety precautions being taken there. As we'll discuss later, maintaining a social distance of 6 feet between the administrator and the donor is really easy to accomplish with lab-based saliva drug testing. So after learning about the benefits and advantages of Intercept, I know you had them on a slide earlier, so I won't go through all that again, but especially during this pandemic, he was in shock that there was one product that would meet all his needs, which was Intercept. It reduces the time for a drug test, no need to pull them off the job to go to a collection center, and, along with a whole host of other advantages. So because the product detected more positives and was virtually impossible to cheat, he wouldn't have any more shy bladder issues or dilute specimens because in the summertime, construction workers drink a lot of water on the job. So he was very happy and feels like he hit a home run with Intercept.
So you made a couple of interesting points there as you articulated the characteristics or the attributes of lab-based oral fluid or saliva testing. One of them was that in this company's particular situation, they were having trouble finding collection sites that either were open long enough to accommodate this company's hours or needs, or maybe just finding collection sites that were open or willing to collect urine samples. So I'll throw this question out to our audience, and you can use the chat section if you have a comment that you want to add. But are you having anybody on the line that would like to answer? Are you having problems finding collection sites that would provide the sort of traditional services of collecting urine samples? And have you had any companies or clients, if you're a provider or if you're an end user, consider switching to lab-based oral fluid testing as a result of the problems that they're having, excuse me, with getting urine collections done? So I throw that out to the audience. And before we go to nursing homes, though, Judy, you kind of referred to some of the things that I think would probably apply to question 5. So if companies are having problems finding collection sites that will provide the urine collection for them, they're concerned maybe about employees, or maybe even employees are saying, hey, I don't want to go to that collection site. I don't want to be around other people where I can't guarantee, sort of the social distancing and stuff like that. How does the oral fluid collection how is it safe, for example? Do you still run into the same challenges with oral fluid collections as you would with urine collections in terms of safety of the donor, safety of the collector?
I think what's happening is that a lot of people are becoming educated on how the COVID virus is transmitted, especially with relation to the saliva droplets. So when you talk, it can go 3 feet into the air and stay there, I think, for 20 seconds. If you sneeze, it goes farther. If you cough, and whatever. And a lot of times at the more popular collection centers, people are lined up to use the same bathroom. So that's the concern we were hearing, that the people didn't want to go into the bathroom because they didn't know if it was okay to breathe, let alone if it was wiped down. Most places are doing a good job wiping down in between the people, but there's nothing you can really do about the air and then the recycled air or recirculated air in the collection center itself. So the way Intercept has actually solved the problem for a new customer we have that is a nursing facility is she doesn't have to take somebody out of the office that she knows is sterilized and they block the airflow off into this room. She knows that that room is controlled. She can do the test right there. She doesn't have to worry about any of the unproductive time of sending somebody not only out for a urine drug test, but she said it's funny how they always seem to get lost coming back to the facility, and they grab a cup of coffee and they do this and do that. So there's always excuses for how long it takes them to go for a test and come back. But basically what they're doing is they have the room set up, so they have a 6-foot long table. Before the person comes in, they'll put the swab at the end of the 6-foot table. So then when the person comes in, they just go to the end of the table. The administrator is at the other end, so they're 6 feet apart from each other. And all the administrator does is give directions. The donor is the one that does all the work. The swab looks sort of like a flat toothbrush. They put it in their mouth. They wait 5 minutes. First you wait 10 minutes before putting it in the mouth. Put it in the mouth, then take it out. The donor is doing everything. They put it in the little shipping container. They put the security seal on, and then they put it in the FedEx bag, and they leave the room. So there's absolutely no problem with maintaining the 6-foot difference.
And I put this slide up on the screen that shows the sort of 3-step process that you were just describing, where you see the swab, about to enter the mouth, and then putting it in the vial, and then sealing it and preparing it for shipping. Now, before we go back to question 4, because that's really sort of a hot topic, we did get a couple of comments. Beth, who does business in Pennsylvania, says she hasn't had any problems getting collections done. But Bruce didn't say what part of the country he's from. He said that since the coronavirus has started, test sites have been either closed altogether or not processing drug tests due to treating COVID-19 donors. And see, that again comes back to your point, Judy, which is that we're hearing from companies all over the country that their employees simply do not want to go to collection sites because they don't want to be around potential or people who may be infected. So that's an issue now, probably an issue that's not going to go away in the future. And so that's why the collection process that Judy just described with oral fluid testing, I think, becomes ever more important, because you're just not going to perhaps want to take on the liability of sending somebody to an offsite collection site. It may be a matter of somebody not willing to go. And there was guidance from DOT on that. If somebody doesn't want to go, you can't collect it. You still have to count it as a refusal to test, but you're supposed to document it so that you can give the reason why the test couldn't be completed. And we'll come back to the collection process, but I think the overall thing that I came away with what you were describing, Judy, is that the collector really becomes an observer, and they're observing the process taking place.
Yeah, and another point that is really very important but often overlooked. So for construction companies, if they have an accident after 3 o'clock, or nursing homes, they have 3 shifts. Nobody, has a shift off. They're all there for 3 shifts. And trying to find a collection center for post-accident in either of those industries is extremely difficult. And when you do, the collection center jacks up the price. I had a company tell me they had an accident at 2 in the morning. They had to have the person tested. The only collection center was 2 hours away. They had to send a supervisor and the worker 2 hours each way, and then they were charged $300 for the drug test alone. So having Intercept is such an excellent solution for those problems because it's the same price 24/7.
Yeah. And I can see that our time is flying by quickly. Let me jump to question number 6 because this came up a couple of times. And we do have a question from the audience that I want to get to that's sort of related to this. So Judy, in your experience, has an oral fluid positive needed a urine test to back it up? In other words, is the oral fluid test legally defensible, scientifically accurate, or do you need a urine test to back up a result?
Well, actually, I'll go so far as to say you never, ever, ever want to use a urine test as a confirmation test. So there's a couple reasons. First, Intercept has been to court 12 times and has never gone beyond the deposition stage. It is a really strong product that's recognized by the courts. Second, Intercept is actually a screening and confirmation test. So there is no need for a confirmation test. But third, we had some situations at companies that show another reason why you don't want to do that. So we had a construction company that wanted to do both Intercept and urine drug tests. And what was happening was they would get some positives with Intercept and then no positives with the urine test. Well, that's because everybody was cheating it, we found out, with synthetic urine that was purchased over the internet. So what was happening was the company decided that there were first false positives with Intercept, and they decided to stick with urine, and it didn't matter how much explanations went. That's how that situation went. If you want, and so sort of similarly, if you quote unquote confirm an Intercept test with a urine test, you've already gone like 24 to 30 hours until you get the results from the Intercept. Then by the time you make an appointment to go for a urine confirmation test, you're probably adding on another day. So it could be just enough time that the drugs are out of the person's body. So with or without synthetic urine, they might come up negative. So it's just, there's a different time matrix here, which is the basic reason why you don't want to mix urine and saliva in the same processing.
Okay. And that brings us to a question. We have 2 questions from the audience that I want to insert because they sort of relate to what you were just talking about. So the first one is, and I'll take a stab at this one. The first one was related to state drug testing laws. And then the second part of it was the DOT regulations. So on the state drug testing laws part, we know that the federal government, SAMHSA, issued guidelines for lab-based oral fluid testing back in October. It's the first time in 30 years that SAMHSA has issued drug testing regulations or guidelines for an alternative testing method to lab-based urine testing. So this is a big, big move, of course. Generally, before that, there were only 3 states that had drug testing laws that either directly or indirectly didn't allow lab-based oral fluid testing: Vermont, Maine, and Hawaii. All the other states, with some exceptions depending on the type of law, allowed lab-based oral fluid testing. So we've had people ask that question. And so it's really only 3 states, Maine, Vermont, and Hawaii, that you have to be concerned about, just generally speaking. But what about the DOT regulations, Judy? Does DOT allow lab-based oral fluid testing at this time?
Well, so far they don't. So a lot of companies, a lot of our customers have dual programs if they have DOT drivers. So they keep the DOT as lab-based urine, and then they'll have the rest of the employees doing the lab-based saliva Intercept because of those advantages.
Now, you've been doing this a long time, so do you want to venture a guess as to when DOT might allow lab-based oral fluid testing?
Yeah, well, based on the results and the output from SAMHSA, we're hoping perhaps at the end of next year.
Okay. And something interesting to go along with that is that when SAMHSA issued the oral fluid mandatory guidelines back in October, they predicted that over a 3 to 4 year period of time, 25 to 30% of all drug testing in the federal government would transition to lab-based oral fluid testing. That's a pretty big jump from right now, currently, outside of DOT, of course, because it doesn't allow it at this time. Lab-based oral fluid testing probably represents about 8 to 10% of the market, drug testing market. So to go from that to 25 to 30% is a big jump. And of course, now with the conditions imposed on employers because of the COVID-19 situation, we're probably going to see an even bigger jump than that. We're getting really tight on time. And I'll just say to everybody who's still submitting questions, we will get to your questions one way or the other, either before we end today's 30-minute webinar, or we'll write out answers and send them to you. So in the closing couple of minutes that we have, Judy, what would be your advice for a company that's considering lab-based oral fluid testing, and in particular as it relates to a safety-sensitive workplace?
Well, I always advise companies to learn as much as they can because I feel education is key. They need to learn the benefits. They learn to know the pros and the cons of the program that they currently have versus the pros and the cons of another program that they might be considering. And that once they become educated, they'll be able to make the best decision.
Okay. And what about companies that are considering maybe instant or point of collection testing? Would oral fluid be an option there?
Yeah, sure. There are. The important thing to know is that there are only a few instant saliva drug tests on the market that are permitted in the workplace. All the rest are forensic use only. So once again, they need to be educated on that. And then sometimes we find customers want to use the instant saliva during pre-employment if they're at a job fair or something like that. But again, it's important to know how the cutoff levels affect the results. And we go over all that with people just so they know the ins and the outs.
And I know I'm going out of order here, but we only have a couple of minutes, but I do want to come back to your experience with nursing homes because we've heard so much about what's going on in nursing homes as a result of COVID-19. Is drug testing common in that industry, and do they use oral fluid testing?
Yeah, absolutely. I have never met a nursing home that doesn't do drug testing. And I will say they seem to have more of an open mind about different kinds of drug testing. They don't just say, hey, we're going to do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. So I find that a lot of nursing homes are very open-minded, and that, yes, all of our customers in the nursing home industry are using Intercept.
Thank you for that great information. If anybody would like to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
They can send me an email at jswartley@redplanettesting.com, or my cell phone is 610-509-0567. It's good being with you, Bill.
Thank you, Judy. And you can see the contact information for OraSure on the bottom of your screen. Jessica is going to make sure that everybody on today's webinar gets a copy of the slide deck and access to the recording. We want to remind you again that the next 30-minute Mondays webinar is scheduled for June 1st. It's point of collection and lab-based oral fluid testing. It will feature Brandon Williams from OraSure Technologies. And then after that, we will have a series of COVID-19 related webinars on safe practices in the workplace COVID testing, etc., and legal considerations that are very important, of course, as we go forward on this. Thank you to everybody who's joined us for today's webinar. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we will respond in writing and all of the questions will be answered. Thanks again to Judy Swartley from Red Planet Substance Abuse Testing and to OraSure Technologies for sponsoring today's webinar. And that concludes our presentation.